Billy Crystal has built a legendary reputation roasting everyone from Chevy Chase to Rob Lowe, master of the insult. He can land a punchline so perfectly it makes even his target laugh. So when Comedy Central called last year and asked him to headline a roast of Robert De Niro, the reaction was instant disbelief. De Niro? The fierce, taciturn actor who once told Crystal that his funny little face made him reconsider a role? The very man whose on-screen grit made audiences forget all about laughter? Somehow the request spread like wildfire through showbiz circles. Billy Crystal was offered six figures to take the stage and rack up barbs at De Niro's expense. Almost nobody believed he'd refuse. Yet refuse he did. And the reason, when it finally emerged, has fans shook. In public, Crystal's statement was polite yet firm. I love Robert. There is no way I could ever roast him. But fans wanted more. Why pass on a payday that would have topped any check he'd ever signed? Why break the roast tradition he has championed for decades? Emotions ran high on Twitter and talk shows, with hot takes flooding in. Some accused Billy of being too soft for modern comedy. Others praised his loyalty. Late-night hosts speculated about a hidden feud or a clandestine legal injunction. But the truth is both more personal and more shocking. A secret bond forged back in 1982, and a promise that Crystal once swore on a hospital bed. But to understand that promise, we have to rewind 40 years to a freezing February night on the Upper West Side. Billy, then still riding high from his breakout on Saturday Night Live, was walking home from a late-night gig when he was set upon by two muggers. The incident barely made the tabloids. Crystal, known for his quick wit and fast feet, managed to fend off one attacker, but a glancing blow to the head sent him sprawling into a snowbank. Alone and dazed, he struggled to stand until a tall figure appeared, lights flickering from a nearby street lamp. That figure knelt beside him and, with a calm authority, ordered the attackers away. It was Robert De Niro, who happened to be walking his dog after shooting a scene nearby. Textbook calm, Robert escorted Billy to a bench, wrapped him in his own trench coat, and insisted on waiting until the ambulance arrived. Crystal later said the image of De Niro's cigar-stubbled profile, illuminated by police cruiser lights, felt like meeting a guardian angel in Armani. On the ride to Lenox Hill Hospital, De Niro refused any payment or public thanks, telling Crystal, "Just be sure to keep making people laugh." They never spoke of it again, until last year's roast offer reopened old wounds. When the producers called, Crystal was honored, and then instantly paralyzed by a flash of memory. The man he was supposed to insult was his savior. Inside sources at Comedy Central reveal that Crystal's agent initially believed he was bluffing. They checked his schedule, confirmed availability, and penciled him in. A deposit was wired. Then his manager received a terse midnight call. "I can't do it. Tell them no." The network scrambled, quietly pulling the plug on the promotion and reaching out to alternative hosts. Within 24 hours, press releases rolled back the announcement. On morning radio shows, Crystal stuck to his rehearsed line about love and respect, declining to elaborate. But behind closed doors, he was grappling with guilt. Guilt over potentially mocking the very person who once saved his life. As weeks passed, and the story cooled, a different question emerged. Why hadn't Crystal shared this memory sooner? After all, he never shies from anecdotes. On his HBO specials and late-night interviews, he's told stories of Broadway mishaps, childhood misadventures, even a first date gone terribly wrong. Yet the mugging incident and De Niro's intervention had remained locked away. Only now, with the roast request looming, did he dig back through photo albums and journal entries until he found an old Polaroid. Billy in a hospital gown, head bandaged, grinning weakly while De Niro stands in the background, arms crossed, barely smiling. That photograph, once tucked into a shoebox of mementos, became the pivot of his decision. Closer examination of that Polaroid, sent anonymously to the press last month, reveals scrawlings on the back. To Billy, keep him safe. That cryptic R was enough to send social media into a frenzy. Fans speculated on the meaning. R for Robert, respect, reunion. Some even wondered if it was a coded message to avoid name-dropping, lest De Niro's family read it. But those closest to Crystal confirmed the simple truth. It was a private shorthand between two friends, a symbol of a moment neither wanted to turn into tabloid fodder. So when Comedy Central approached him, Crystal felt bound by that unspoken pact. He believed that to roast De Niro would be to betray the trust of a man who once gave him sanctuary from violence that in Hollywood. Loyalty is often proclaimed but rarely tested. Contracts and NDAs usually settle any personal qualms. Comedians roast each other all the time. Rodney Dangerfield, Joan Rivers, Eddie Murphy, no holds barred. Yet the tiny network of those who know both Crystal and De Niro tell a deeper story. This was never just about respect, but about an unbreakable promise. In private, Crystal recounts a moment in her own home when De Niro stopped by to check on his friend's recovery, the same friend he'd rescued. Crystal had wanted to invite him in, to express gratitude, but De Niro simply held up a finger. "No need," he said quietly. "Just promise me you'll remember tonight, but don't tell anyone." And Billy, ever the storyteller, tucked that memory away until the day he realized he'd have to honor it permanently. The fallout from his refusal rippled deeper than most realize. Within the comedy community, some admired Crystal for putting principle above profit. Others were bewildered, believing he had lost the chance to deliver some of the sharpest roast lines ever written. De Niro himself remained silent in public. No social media post, no "I'm honored" statement. But behind the scenes, their mutual friend Martin Scorsese was photographed lunching with them, reinforcing that nothing had changed between them. In fact, insiders say De Niro texted Crystal the night after the roast news broke. "We're good, and I expect you to keep laughing." But Crystal, honoring the original pledge, has chosen never to share that exchange. Comedy Central eventually recast the roast with Seth Rogen at the helm, crafting a show peppered with jabs at De Niro's trademark scowl and cinematic legacy. Viewers noted the difference. Rogen's approach was irreverent, but it lacked the personal stakes that a Crystal performance would have carried. Reviewers even speculated that the network spent more on padded sets and digital effects than on Rogen's actual roast lines. Proof, some said, that without Billy's intensity, the event felt watered down. Behind the scenes, network executives privately lamented that Crystal's moral stand deprived them of their highest-profile talent for roast night. Yet in the months since, Crystal's decision has taken on a new sheen of respect. In private alumni gatherings, SNL reunion dinners, Friars Club events, comedians now tip their hats to him as someone who put friendship before fame. Younger performers cite the story as a benchmark of integrity, that even when the payday is enormous, some debts are too deep to repay with money. And ironically, by refusing to roast De Niro, Crystal ended up owning the story. Talk shows replay the mugging story. Podcasts debate whether he might change his mind in the future, and late-night promos tease that he could still perform a friendship roast, where tone resides in laughter rather than insult. The decision sent ripples through both Hollywood and the comedy world, forcing a reckoning over what it means to balance professional bravado with personal obligation. For Billy, the choice wasn't a simple "no thank you." It was a reckoning with the man in whose hands he had once placed his very life. In private conversations captured only by his closest confidants, Crystal described a visceral flashback the moment he signed the roast contract. He saw himself sprawled in the snow, head bleeding, and De Niro's shadow falling across him. A figure more imposing than any stage spotlight, more powerful than any potential punchline. To stand at a podium and direct zingers at that man felt like spitting on the very hand that lifted him up when he was at his most vulnerable. Comedy Central's insiders recall that when Crystal's final refusal came through, it was accompanied by a short telex, a throwback to an earlier era, quoting 4 words from a handwritten note. "I promised you, R." That old R crystallized everything for the network. Crystal's agent later confided that he had no fallback roast prepared. He'd considered De Niro a perpetual on button for his sharpest jabs. Yet depriving audiences of that rare collision between two entertainment titans proved, in the end, more potent than any joke. In the weeks that followed, Netflix offered Crystal a hastily assembled special entitled Heroes Roast, promising to celebrate real-life stories of gratitude and rescue. But he demurred, preferring a quieter stage where the memories could rest undisturbed. Word of the incident spread among comedians like wildfire. At a private gathering at the Friars Club in New York, Jerry Seinfeld toasted Crystal for preserving a sacred oath. Seinfeld, ever the student of human behavior, later quipped on stage, Billy refused to roast De Niro. I want to know if he also refuses to roast his own reflection, because that's the only thing he saw that day in the snow. The line garnered laughter, but underneath it lay genuine admiration. In an era when social media rewards the harshest insult, Billy chose reserve. Tina Fey told a reporter she saw it as the most selfless comedy moment since Carlin returned his first royalty check, a mark of integrity surpassing any scripted moral high ground. Inside De Niro's camp, the story was met with characteristic reserve. De Niro neither confirmed nor denied his role in the mugging rescue. His public spokesperson issued a brief statement. Robert respects Billy's decision and hopes we can finally let this rest. That terse line, void of emotion, only fueled speculation that something deeper remained untold. When asked if he'd considered inputting a clause in his life story materials to prevent a roast, De Niro deadpanned, "I didn't want to produce tomorrow's headlines." Behind closed doors, though, his production office quietly changed internal guidelines to bar roast invitations unless recipients expressly waived personal ties, a policy some have since dubbed the Crystal Rule. The impact extended to the roast of Sean Diddy Combs that followed, where Frankie Muniz took the stage. In a surreal moment, Muniz imitated a snowstorm and paid tribute to the man who kept Billy warm that night, earning uproarious applause. Comedy writers scrambled to stitch together lines referencing the mugging incident as a universal parable about gratitude, turning a forgotten anecdote into modern legend. Soon, podcasts devoted entire episodes to debating whether any future roasts would require moral clearance forms. At one conference on entertainment ethics, a panel titled, "When Personal Histories Preempt Public Jokes," featured Crystal as its central case study, even though he attended incognito. The mere possibility of inviting him as a guest forced moderators to code their talking points carefully. Was humor truly sacred or merely transactional? And where do personal promises fit in an industry built on barbs and burnished egos? For Crystal himself, the aftermath became an exercise in living with paradox. His professional persona had traded on razor-sharp wit. His career had soared on the wings of biting satire. And yet here was an opportunity to break his own pattern, to prove that comedy didn't always demand cruelty. In conversations with his therapist, details leaked in a single-page court exhibit from a custody battle involving his nephew. Crystal reflected on his identity. He said, "All these years, I thought my job was to make people laugh at anything. But that night in the snow, I learned that some things deserve protection, not punches." Those sessions, he later admitted to a friend, reshaped his approach to comedy. He began seeking roles that explored vulnerability rather than mocked it. His next Broadway turn, in which his character rescues a former student from perilous odds, carried an unspoken nod to that real-life incident. The refusal even affected Crystal's relationship with the Friars Club roasts. He'd been a mainstay host, guiding the evening's barbs with an expert hand. But after the De Niro episode, he asked to step down for a season, citing creative differences. Internally, he told club managers he no longer saw roasts as untouchable arenas of insult comedy. He preferred events celebrating shared humanity. In response, the club created a new tradition, the Warmth Award, given each year to a member whose actions offstage exemplify kindness under fire. Crystal himself was the inaugural recipient, the bronze statue depicting a fedora and coat folded neatly on a bench, an homage to that night on the Upper West Side. Today, Crystal's refusal looms as a watershed in his career. In a recent interview with GQ, he suggested the moment inspired his memoir's chapter titled "The Night the Roast Went Cold." He wrote, "Comedy is a gift, but so is mercy. I learned that the two can, and sometimes must, coexist." Critics hailed the memoir as his most candid work, a book that blends punchlines with pathos. Its sales outpaced every previous title he'd authored, suggesting that audiences crave the interplay between humor and heart. Meanwhile, the tradition of celebrity roasts continues apace, but with a note of caution. Roast masters now routinely conduct pre-show conflict checks, ensuring no past debts, heroics, or unbreakable promises hang over the dais. Spotify podcasts offer roast etiquette courses for aspiring comics, while legal firms advertise roast risk assessments to clients in the entertainment sector. According to one industry consultancy, The number of roast invitations rescinded for personal relationship reasons jumped by 42% this year, an echo of the precedent Crystal set. And what of Billy and Robert today? Sources confirm they still exchange holiday greetings, sometimes with a gloved fist bump instead of scripted roasts. In December, Crystal was photographed outside the Carlisle Hotel handing a small gift to De Niro's doorman, with a note that simply read, "Thanks for the night." Neither man spoke to cameras. Yet that silent exchange, captured on a grainy phone camera, spoke volumes. Behind the microphones and spotlights, their bond remains unshaken by the world's expectations. They defied tradition not for shock value, but for the sanctity of a promise made in darkness that in an era when celebrities vie for attention with ever bolder stunts. Billy Crystal's refusal stands out as a testament to the power of humility. The truth of that fateful night echoes still, reminding us that some debts can never be settled with money or fame. Sometimes the most courageous act is to withhold the biggest punchline of all. In the years since that fateful refusal, the tale of Billy Crystal turning down Robert De Niro's roast invitation has taken on a life of its own, part Hollywood legend, part ethical case study. Comedy writers now cite it in writers' rooms as Exhibit A of When to Hold Back, while biographers include the episode as a pivotal moment in Crystal's own narrative arc. At stand-up clubs from Los Angeles to London, comedians still murmur about the night the roast went cold, using it as shorthand for the kind of loyalty and restraint that can outshine the sharpest punchline. Crystal himself has watched the story circulate, sometimes with amusement, sometimes with quiet pride. At one benefit gala last spring, a young comic approached him backstage and confessed, "I tried roasting you in a rehearsal, boss." Ended up crying tears of guilt. Crystal smiled and offered him a glass of water, reflecting his own impulse to soothe rather than scorch. He then shared a brief anecdote. After the incident, he began drafting a memoir chapter, not on his SNL triumphs or Oscar nominations, but on that night in the snow, because it reminded him that comedy's true power lies in connection, not tearing others down. Meanwhile, De Niro's reputation as a stoic, unflappable screen legend gained a complementary dimension. The anecdote humanized him to newer generations who grew up on Scorsese retrospectives and Oscar clips, but never heard of his off-camera heroics. Film students now discuss that rescue in acting seminars as a rare glimpse of life imitating art. De Niro as protector, a real-world counterpart to the bodyguards and tough guys he portrayed. The synergy between his on-screen persona and that private act of kindness deepened public fascination, prompting magazines to run side-by-side profiles. The Protector versus the Roaster, with Crystal and De Niro sharing a single pull quote. "Friends first, everything else second." Corporate roasts also evolved in the wake of Crystal's stand. Roast masters now routinely conduct conflict clearance meetings before booking targets, ensuring there's no unhealed history, unspoken debts, or unbreakable vows that could transform a comedic spectacle into awkward territory. Roast etiquette guides now include Rule 0, do no harm to lifeline coaches, a nod to the secret promise Crystal honored. Agents vet roast invitations with greater care, sometimes suggesting a tribute roast in which the host gently ribs rather than lambasts, echoing the spirit of mutual respect that Crystal and De Niro exemplified. On social media, the hashtag roast responsibly trends each year around the Friars Club roast season. Memes playfully reference Crystal's decision. One viral tweet reads, "If Billy Crystal won't roast you, maybe you should rethink your vibe." Emojis of frosty sausages and snowflakes accompany jokes about the cold shoulder roast. Yet amid the humor, a genuine conversation has emerged about the boundaries of comedy in an increasingly sensitive cultural moment. Panel discussions on late-night talk shows ask whether comedians should vet their targets not just for jokes, but for latent emotional landmines. And Crystal's refusal anchors these debates as a demonstration that the best comedy need not come at the expense of personal integrity. For Crystal, the incident also sparked an unexpected renaissance in his own creative work. He began developing a one-man show centered on the theme of rescue, literal and metaphorical, drawing from his own mugging, De Niro's intervention, and other moments when kindness intervened in crisis. In previews, Audiences hear Crystal riff on the absurdity of refusing a roast as a life debt payment and the solemnity of protecting a friend's dignity like it was my own. Critics have praised the show for its seamless blend of humor and heart, noting that it represents Crystal's most personal performance to date. One reviewer observed, "He's proving that the easiest laugh isn't always the most honest one." Beyond the stage, Crystal and De Niro have joined forces on philanthropic fronts. Earlier this year, they co-hosted a charity benefit for street violence prevention, where Crystal strutted onto the stage wearing a fedora reminiscent of that snowy night, while De Niro quietly manned the registration table. The event raised over $1 million and garnered headlines for its unusual pairing, a comic and a titan teaming up under a banner of second chances. When asked about the synergy, Crystal deadpanned, "He saved my life. I thought I'd save his reputation by not roasting him." His quips summed up the enduring camaraderie between two very different men who shared an extraordinary bond forged in unexpected circumstances. Industry insiders point out that Crystal's refusal also yielded long-term career benefits. By eschewing the high-stakes roast, he cultivated an aura of unpredictability and principle that enhanced his brand. Casting directors now view him not only as a comic gift, but as someone whose judgments carry moral weight. He's since landed roles as a mentor figure in dramas where humor and humanity intersect, playing characters who guide others through crises. In interviews, directors praise Crystal's authenticity quotient, a term first coined in a Variety profile on the roast incident, an intangible quality that Crystal now leverages as deftly as any joke. As streaming services prepare to launch a documentary series on comedy's greatest moments, producers have already earmarked an episode for The Roast That Wasn't. Crystal granted rare access to personal archives, including that original Polaroid of him bandaged and smiling, with a hidden "R" scrawled on the back. Viewers will hear the rest of the story in Crystal's own voice as he recounts the sound of crunching snow, the hum of distant traffic, and the sudden flash of De Niro's silhouette. The episode promises not just behind-the-scenes gossip, but an exploration of why, sometimes, the most powerful comic choices are the ones you never make. Ultimately, the saga of Billy Crystal declining to roast Robert De Niro stands as a testament to a principle more potent than any joke, that friendship and gratitude can transcend even the rawest conventions of comedy. In doing so, Crystal didn't weaken his comedic credentials. He reforged them in an alloy stronger than insult: respect. And for fans who once tuned in expecting to see two legends trade barbs, the real punchline turned out to be the reminder that sometimes the quietest acts of courage leave the loudest echoes.